you ever wondered how demons find their way into our lives? Is there a hidden doorway that we unknowingly leave open, inviting darkness into our very souls? Today, we are diving into one of the most crucial and unsettling questions of the spiritual world. How do demons come in? From ancient curses to modern-day occult practices, we're unraveling the 7 mysterious ways these dark entities gain entry into our lives. Stay with us, because what you learn today might just protect you from unseen forces lurking in the shadows. Your family history, personal choices, even your most vulnerable moments, all could be doorways for the demonic. Can you afford to remain in the dark? The stakes are higher than you think. Join us as we reveal the truths that could change your life forever. This is not just a lesson in spiritual warfare. It's a wake-up call. Let's begin. We're going to start by addressing one of the most significant questions concerning this entire theme. A question that many people are concerned about is, how do demons enter? How do they gain entry into human personalities and lives? The answers I will offer are based on my experience and are not entirely comprehensive. However, I will list 7 different ways they can come in. The first method is what I call an occult background. In other words, somewhere in your family history, there has been involvement with the occult. When you talk about the occult, you realize you are dealing with false gods. That's essentially what it is. There has been a breaking of the first 2 commandments, which are the fundamental commandments. You shall have no other gods besides me, and you shall not make any graven image to worship. All forms of idolatry automatically expose people to demons. In connection with these 2 commandments, the Lord said He would visit the sins of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation. I don't believe this applies as much to the other commandments, but it is given in the context of the first 2 commandments. Therefore, if your father, grandfather, great-grandfather, or some other relative was involved in the occult, false religion, or idolatry, then there is an opening in your life for evil spirits. You might say, that's not fair. Well, the truth is, the devil isn't fair. What I want you to understand is no one is condemning you for having the problem. Condemnation will only come to you if you reject the solution. That's where condemnation arises. The second way is through personal occult involvement. At this point, it's probably best to read a scripture. There's an English saying, "He who sups with the devil must use a spoon with a long handle." I want to tell you there is no spoon with a handle long enough to make it safe to sup with the devil. You give him your little finger, and he's grabbed above your elbow. There is simply no way it is safe to be involved in the occult. I'm going to read Deuteronomy 18:10-12. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire. This refers to offering your children as living sacrifices to a pagan god by putting them in an oven. Notice that the other things listed by God are classified in the same list as having your children offered as living sacrifices by fire to a pagan god. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, a fortune teller, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. That's a comprehensive list. I think every kind of occult practice is included, for all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord. Many Christians play with horoscopes and think there's no harm in it. If you played with horoscopes under the law of Moses, you would have been put to death. That's God's estimate of that kind of involvement. The third method is what I call prenatal influences, events that occur while you are still in your mother's womb. Many people have an evil spirit enter them during this phase of their life. The most common single reason is rejection. A mother resents the baby she is carrying in her womb. Maybe she wasn't married and it is going to be an embarrassment. Or maybe she isn't getting along well with her husband, making the baby a burden in the family. Or perhaps the financial situation makes it difficult to care for another child. Regardless, she resents that little life starting in her womb, and that little person in the womb is very sensitive to attitudes. It is not just a fetus, it is a person. The baby can come out with a spirit of rejection already in it. Alternatively, if a pregnant woman experiences a shock or a moment of fear and yields to that fear, the spirit of fear can enter her. The spirit then has 2 options. It can stay in the woman or stay in the infant in her womb. It may find it more convenient to stay in the infant. When the infant is born, it comes out with a spirit of fear. Let me show you a scripture that most people don't notice in one. Peter 3, which advises wives. I want to highlight this one aspect. It tells wives that the biblical pattern is Sarah's attitude toward Abraham. 1 Peter 3:6. As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. To be a daughter of Abraham, you must be able to resist the sudden shock of fear. It is very clear that women are more prone to sudden fright or panic than men. I have dealt with many cases of people who needed deliverance because of some shock that came to the mother while they were still in the womb. Another interesting observation is that during my full-time ministry, or when I was more engaged in it, I noticed many people in a certain age group in the United States seemed to need deliverance from rejection. I began to think they were all born during the same period. I discovered they were born during the Great Depression. The mother already had several mouths to feed and not enough money, and here comes another child. She may be a good woman, but inwardly resents the responsibility, and the child is born with a spirit of rejection. We don't have time to dwell on any of these. Number 4 is soulish domination. There's a difference between the spirit and the soul, which I can't elaborate on here. Many people control and manipulate others through what I call soul thoughts, or soulish domination. The most common example in contemporary American culture is a mother dominating her children, especially her sons. There was a best-selling book in the Jewish community titled How to Be a Good Jewish Mother. One of the lessons was how to get your son to play his violin in public using no other motivation but guilt. The Yiddish term, yamomo, perfectly exemplifies what I am talking about. You know about the lady in the big theater who shouted, "Is there a doctor in the house?" A man stood up and said, "Yes." She replied, "Boy, do I have a daughter for you." But it goes beyond that. I have met successful businessmen, bank presidents, and similar individuals who never developed emotional maturity because they were still tied to their mother's umbilical cord. The spiritual umbilical cord had never been cut. The methods of manipulation are endless. For example, a mother who dominated her family by getting migraines whenever things didn't go her way. The family had to tiptoe around, not make noise because the mother had another headache. She kept them from doing anything she didn't want them to do by having migraines. The two dirty words in this context are dominate and manipulate. Wherever you meet them, you've encountered the devil. Number 5. I've had to tell some people, if you want me to help you, I have to be honest. The fact is, your mother is a witch. You still have to honor her, but she's a witch. I've had to tell people who got delivered, you're not free to go back to your parents' home. You have to stay away because you don't have the spiritual strength to stay free from that dominating, manipulating influence. Number 5 is pressures in early childhood. A child's spiritual and emotional defenses are not strong enough to keep out persistent demon pressure. James 3:16 says, "For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there." An atmosphere of strife and disharmony between parents generates conditions in which children are exposed to demon influence. More than 90% of children cannot keep them out. My observation is that 80% of demon problems start in a person's life before the age of 5, and the parents are responsible for that situation. Number 6 is a moment or place of weakness. This can be emotional or physical weakness. For example, a woman standing on a street corner witnesses a horrible car accident. She is exposed to the spirit of fear. A woman with one child loses him at age 5, goes into depression, and stays in it for years. She has opened up to the spirit of grief, which is very powerful. Or a woman expecting to get married has her engagement canceled at the last moment and yields to the spirit of disappointment, going through life incomplete. I was teaching once, and a Pentecostal lady on the front row reacted dramatically when I mentioned the spirit of disappointment. Her entire personality changed until she was delivered from it. Building hopes on something that doesn't work out can expose you to an evil force. Another kind of weakness is physical. An example is epilepsy caused by an evil spirit following a physical injury. Some years ago, my first wife and I prayed for an 18-year-old girl diagnosed with epilepsy. She believed it was an evil spirit. After praying, we felt the spirit had left. However, the Lord indicated our job wasn't finished. I asked her how it started, and she mentioned a head injury from a baseball, after which the seizures began. The physical injury opened the door to a spirit of epilepsy. We needed to close the door by praying for the healing of her brain. She took no more medication and never had another seizure. This is an example of a moment or place of weakness. The last method is sinful acts or habits. Persisting in certain sinful behaviors will eventually become demonic. For instance, I had to pray for a young woman who watched The Exorcist, despite knowing she shouldn't. She went and something entered her. And God knows what happened after. Maybe you will find out in our next video, where we uncover how you can spot a demon in your life. Click the video and screen now to find out how.